you so much for giving me this opportunity. I was super excited when you mentioned getting to see these presentations. Just a little bit about me, as I look at talent, I've had the fortune of hiring lots of people working around the world. Today, I'm a vice president at Intel. I'm actually the most senior African-American vice president at Intel. And some of the fun is that, I manage teams around the world, up to 1,100 employees working in places like Germany and Sweden and Romania, Russia, China, Costa Rica, Mexico, and of course, places closer to home, Texas, Oregon, California. One of the things I love is that I love to travel and experience new things. So it was the perfect job and opportunity. But one of the things that was always interesting in terms of starting off, I actually started off at Intel as an intern. Just a little bit about getting that first internship, it was so challenging. What is the one question they ask you as you're interviewing for internships? What other internships have you done? And it's like, wait a second, I'm trying to get my first one. Could you please help me get my first one so at least I can answer the next company about that. So when I saw the Stemaway approach and Debaleena was sharing with me, that virtualization of it and getting practical experience is just so incredible. The things that I thought I knew I wanted to be when I was going to college were very different after my first internship. I started to find out what I liked to do, what I was good at, what I was bad at, what things I can improve, what kind of managers I liked, what kind of managers I didn't like, what's it like to work in a team. Having practical experience and being able to say in the next conversation, no, I've done something real. This is what makes me so excited about hearing the presentations today. I'm going to get to see what you've already done, and it's just so empowering. I would tell you that if I were interviewing, nothing more powerful than I've done real work. Here are the results. Let's continue forward. So, as I think about that, and so excited about hearing more about what you've accomplished with the Stemaway approach, and just so thrilled at how it empowers you, the participants, this interns, right, to go much further and faster.
Michael, I just wanted to share a little bit of details with you before I hand it over to the students.
Sure.
And we have 6 pathways going right now, and the students who are presenting today are from the full stack pathway. And in future, we want to expand it so the full stack would become more of a software engineering pathway. This particular team, they worked heavily on full stack design. So they're kind of a sub part of the software engineering pathway that we are envisioning for Stemaway.
Excellent.
And this is just to show you some of the numbers. We also had a world map. We couldn't quite fit it into this presentation, but we have people from all over the world, including 2 people who will be presenting today, one from Nigeria and one from India. So it has been a really great experience. And you can see these are the things I know matters a lot to you. So I just wanted to show you that what our goal is to get inclusion, which it's really wide in the sense that we are aiming for educational inclusion, like all colleges having the opportunity for students to take that first step that you were talking about, and also geographical barriers, financial barriers, all of those things are what we are tackling in Stemaway, including, of course, the minority issue, that the gender and racial diversity problem that tech has. So in Stemaway, in this one summer itself, we had quite a bit of success on all of these fronts. And as you look at the students presenting, you will see how well they work together. In each of the projects, in the internships, it's organized as mentor chain projects. So the concept is that we have STEM professionals who are at the top of this chain. It's literally like a chain of mentors. So we have the STEM the mentors who are professionals helping the leads. And most of the students presenting today are leads. There are some participants who also did a great job and are part of this presentation. So the leads learn from the mentors, and then they in turn are leading teams of 8 to 15 students. So this way we are really able to increase the number of opportunities and we had close to 500 students pass through the program in this summer. In terms of the projects that did, we really pushed them. Full stack was no exception. The way we pushed full stack is we designed the project around what I would call an industry code base rather than a standalone coding. And so they did have moments of frustrations, but they managed to do a really good job. And I'll now hand it over to Jeremy to start the presentation. You can hear it in their own words.
Okay, sounds good. So my name is Jeremy, and I was a June full stack participant turned full stack lead in July. And as part of the June full stack pathway, we were tasked to work with and develop into the Discourse codebase. And Discourse is an open source forum code with a very active community that was founded by Jeff Atwood, who's also the co-founder of Stack Exchange. And what Jeff did was take the learning from Stack Exchange to come up with what was known to be known as the perfect open source forum code. The popularity of Discourse can be seen through the list of communities using Discourse, from the Twitter community to Car Talk to Amazon sellers to scientific communities like Docker. And Discourse boasts over 150 plus communities using their code and over 12 million users. And before we set out on this journey of wanting to develop on the Discourse codebase, I can say confidently for my team and I that we had no idea of the behemoth on the other side of the screen. And I like to think that my June experience was analogous to picking a fight with the biggest bully on the block from the size of the code. And shortly after my team and I set our eyes on our first goal, I had no idea where to look inside of this labyrinth to find the correct code I needed to be working with to do what I wanted to do. And looking back, the guidance of our industry mentor, James, was paramount to our success. And in many ways, James served as like the tour guide into the darkness and taught us the skills of the trade to be self-sufficient. And which then it was my turn, as well as all leads can talk to, is to propagate that learning through their teams to create a community of competent members. And this was a valuable experience because now I feel a lot more confident that I can tackle any code base of magnitude to learn how to navigate my way to success with those around me as a team. So to start off this journey of developing on Discourse, it begins with the first challenge, which is Discourse Installation. And I'm going to hand it over to Chuck, which he can tell you more about.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that wonderful presentation. Hi, my name is Solomon Wente. I'm a rising senior in higher institution. I was a participant in the June session and a lead in the July session. I'll be talking on Discourse Installation. Setting up a developing environment for Discourse on local machine could be challenging, but it is an easy thing to do when you meet up with the requirements and equally follow the guide properly. Each operating system has a specific guide on Discourse installation. For Windows users, they need to have any of these three applications in order to install Discourse on their machine. And these include the Windows source system for Linux 2, also known as WSL2, the Docker container, and the traditional Linux virtual machine. For Mac and Linux users, the procedures are very similar and straightforward. You can either install it on a native operating system or by using Docker. Using Docker is quite much easier because there is no need to install any system dependencies as they come pre-installed. However, the issue with Docker is that it will be slightly slower than the native dev environment on Ubuntu and much slower than native install on Mac OS. The average time for the installation, if there is no issues, is an hour 15 minutes, but this also depends on the machine capacity and the internet connection. Specific issues faced by students. Most issues faced by new interns while installing Discourse was the failure to understand the guide properly and how to check if they meet up with the requirements for the setup. This is mostly peculiar to Windows users. A typical case was Terish Gupta's installation. After following the necessary procedure, the Discourse application failed to start. This was because his Windows version was lower than the required version for the setup. Another case was Christine Jonathan. She met all the requirements, but the new version of Ubuntu 20.04 she installed was not yet compatible with Discourse installation. Other common issues with Windows users is that they need to start the Postgres service and Redis server manually before their Discourse application will run. In my team, Nitish and Christine faced this particular issue, but was later resolved. Finally, after a successful installation, we really got our hands dirty utilizing this application, and this was made possible by the resources provided for us by our industry mentor, James Kissel. Sion, one of our participants in the June session, will be giving you comprehensive details on this. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sion, and I was in the June session for full stack as a participant, and I'm currently in machine learning as a participant for the July session, and I'm going to talk about the project resources. So why is it important to track resources? It's very vital, not just to commit them to records, but also just to acknowledge that our work is a collaboration, not just between the teammates, but also between the large community of developers, because when we would get stuck, we would go to these resources and find out what previous people had done to help our project. And by tracking it, we could see the progress that we made and also the challenges that we made, and it was great for a quick reference when we would have to go back and try to find out what we did previously to implement something. So it made a great impact on the team, but also by tracking the resources, it also assisted the July team to get off the ground quickly by having an organized list of references they could go to. So how did we keep track of our resources? So I started a thread called Project Resources under my team category, and I compiled and organized and displayed the sources, as you can see from the images on the PowerPoint. And we got these resources from our industry mentor, James, and also I got them from my teammates. We had a communications channel called Resources, and when people would have a question or need help, we would just find resources for each other. And they came from everywhere, from YouTube and online documentation, Codecademy, W3 Schools, and other posts on the Stemaway forum. So I organized the resources into 3 categories because the project naturally had 3 stages: setting up the development environment and understanding our given code base, and then using our foundational knowledge to achieve our desired outcome. So I split up these categories into installation of workspace, so installing Discourse for development, and also installing the plugins locally to configure an environment similar to the Stemaway forum. And the second category was Discourse specific resources. So it was tips for familiarizing ourselves with the environment and also for plugin development. And then other helpful resources, which included front end and back end, including HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Ruby, Postgres, and version control, Git and GitHub. So I'm going to hand it off to Mutaz for project management now.
Thank you, Sian. So I'm Mutaz, and I was the full stack pathway lead for the July session, and I was also the project management lead for my team. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how project management worked for us. We were tasked with managing remote teams of around 14 members that are spread out over many different time zones. And we had to establish project scope and specifications and timelines in order to make sure that whatever project we set out to build, we could actually build it within the time that we had and make sure we could work efficiently as a team. So in doing this, we used many different tools. So notably, we used Trello in order to delegate tasks to our members. We used G Suite to organize our meetings and set up our Google Meets, and use Calendar to make sure that the time zone issues wouldn't really have to fall on our heads, because that stuff, simple math can sometimes mess up. We use GitHub to collaborate together for our code base, and we use Slack and Discord to maintain these open communication channels so that our team, even though we had a lot of distance in between us, it could feel like we were still in the same room. And now I'm going to pass it off to BM, who's going to be talking about how we used team organization to set up our teams.
Thank you, Mutaz. And I am BJ Maharzan, and I'm one of the participants of the full stack July team. And I'll be continuing to talk about project management, because as we all know, project management is one of the important topics. So as we all might be aware of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' 2 pizza rule. Like if a team cannot be fed by 2 pizza, then the team is too big, that's it. So we further divided the team into multiple sub-teams, like headed by a lead. So this created a very clear transparency and there was more interaction between team members. That was obviously a good part. And there was a specific feature that each sub-team had to accomplish. So we implemented kind of sprint system, which lasted a week. And at the start of each sprint in a team meeting, we did a review of all the backlogs first, and then we planned for the next feature each team will be working on for the upcoming week. And let's go to the next slide. And also within each sub-team, there was like at least 3 meetings a week. And so we basically stuck with a plan where each team member, they will do a quick stand-up answering 3 questions. What did you do yesterday? What will you do today? And are there any obstruction on your way? So these 3 questions, like they have to answer. And this is the key part of keeping track of all the progress. So each team member also have to complete self-assessment that was due each week, and they will have to post all the list of the tasks they completed, skills they have learned, and they had to post it in a Stemaway site. So it was not just limited to technical skills, but each team members, they were open to post their leadership skills and communication skills they have gained by this internship. So self-assessment could be considered as one of the milestones. And apart from this, we conducted feedbacks and surveys frequently so that we can improve our strategy. So with this specific project management structure set, we were able to pull out some interesting projects, which Jeremy and Brenda will be showing up in a bit.
Hi, I'm Brenda, and I was the June team lead and team lead for the internship pathway in July. In the June team, we decided to call our team 404 Not Found because it's super close to what we're working with. And we were a team of 14 people across all over the globe. And the toughest thing I believe was not the plugin and actually scheduling the meetings across time zones. So then we kind of worked with the problems that we were facing ourselves when we were using the Stemaway forum, and we realized that there are these different things that we can change in the forum and enhance it using a plugin. So we realized that these are 4 different problems that we can create plugins for, and we decided to work on them. And soon later, we realized it's a very lofty goal that we've created for ourselves and probably nothing that we can achieve out. And then Deb stepped in and explained to us the idea of impact versus creating stuff, and how your size of the code is not what is more important, and the impact of the code is more important. So she explained to us that we should focus more on the impact of what we're creating versus how, if we create something that revamps the whole thing, people might say that it's something great that you've created, but might not just use it. So you might create something super small, but it can change how people use it and make more impact in their lives. So that's what we set off, and then found one simple problem to work with.
And so this is an example of what we thought was to be something along Deb's vision of creating an impact. So as you can see here, there is a duplicate post. So this is an example of a forum, and you can kind of see that there's 2 posts made by Stemaway here. But what these are actually replies to the post by Michael, but they get duplicated down below. And so it kind of creates this confusing inline conversation that is hard to distinguish. However, there's an indentation with the embedded post above on the second picture to the right. But this is what we wanted to work on. And so when we set our goals on this, we came up with a solution to create a Discourse plugin to help us distinguish between a comment, which is a reply to the post, which is what Michael's post is, and then a reply to a comment, which is what these duplicate replies are. And so we tried color contouring these duplicates. And so moving on to our approach, we had no idea really how to break this down. We didn't really come up with, Brendan and I, when we were going over our documentation at the very end of our successful plugin that we made, we actually wrote down these 6 steps that we followed. But at the beginning, we went straight to the discourse having no idea what to do or where to look for our code. And so we were kind of a chicken with our head cut off in a manner, because the code base was so large and we had no idea where to look. And so what we tried to do is we tried to make a foundation of understanding of the database, how the database was structured, the folder systems. But quite honestly, it was to no avail, because it was too large to really even know what you were looking at. And so with the help from James, as I alluded to earlier, was really important to our success. We started using developer tools, and this was something that was inside of our browsers that helped give us a lead into the code base. And so it's something that we can latch onto and really use to localize the code that we need to be working on.
And once we figured what we were actually looking at, the specifics of each part that we want to work with, we realized that we don't have a distinguisher between the comment and a reply that Jeremy explained. So we first had to create a unique identifier for ourselves. And as you can see here on the screen, we called it isReply, which meant that the duplicate that we're using is now going to be having a hook called isReply, and then we can use that to add our custom CSS. And that is what we did. And the biggest mistake probably that we started off doing was directly working on the original JS and CSS files in the plugin. And then somewhere down the line where we were discussing with James, he was like, what are you guys doing with this? You probably have to create your own plugin folder, have your own personal files, and then do work on that, create whatever you want to do there and not in the original files. So that is where we realized that is how a productionized code is created versus just, messing around with the code base. And as you can see, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is the final output of what our plugin looks like. If you can see the indented little boxes that are there embedded, if you open them, they show up as indented, but if not, the whole text stack now, you can see the difference between gray colors versus the normal comments. So it becomes easier to understand which is a reply, which is a comment. And that probably makes a lot of lives easier when this actually gets into play.
Right. As you can see, I thought it was funny with my commentary there. But so while we came to a good stopping point for the internship, there still exists interest to develop this plugin further, which encompasses adding customization to the code and generating a custom color palette and adding a lot more features, but we didn't have the time available to do that. But with the learning that we got out of this project, we made some key decisions that prepared us for more success during the July session. And more specifically, we thought that it would be more beneficial to take the snowball method of slowly developing incrementally over instead of taking the avalanche method of just taking on the biggest project and then hoping all the smaller ones fall in the line afterwards. And so this really set us up for success in the July session, which I will hand it over to our next presentation.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I was in a July team for a full stack team, but before diving straight into the team, let me just step a little back to talk about history of Discourse itself. So Jeff Atwood, the co-founder of popular forums Stack Exchange, created Discourse along with his developers. So Atwood, he was not happy with whole forum system and he wanted very different, like something very different. And as we know, Stack Exchange is a proprietary software. Atwood wanted something very different, like open source. And on one of his blogs, he also mentioned that proprietary software are likely to strangle themselves with their own terms and conditions. There are just like too many licensing issues. So he wanted an open source project.
I really he likes open source with comments.
That's true. Okay, so how is Discourse different from Stack Exchange? I mean, in Stack Exchange, we can only find answers for a given problem. There might be one best answer, but it is just related with the particular question. And there will be like a bunch of answers, and that's all. But with Discourse, it is a broad discussion platform. There will be a problem, but instead of having just one answer, there will be like a broad discussion, and someone will create a thread asking a question, and the discussion will continue all the way down to the end, it will be infinite. Like it can be as long as we can imagine. And thanks to the timeline tracking of discourse, like we will never get lost in that long thread of discussion. We can navigate back to the time, like wherever we want. And also discourse is customizable with custom themes and plugins. That means companies can use discourse forum and also keep the feel of their own brand and color at the same time. This obviously saves a lot of time for a big company in case they have to implement like forum website. Just use discourse and customize it as per as your need. It will reflect your company image too. So Discourse can be one of the most beneficial forum platform. And Atwood, he worked with .NET for more than 10 years. And that's what Stack Exchange is like, Stack Exchange is coded anyway. But why did he choose Ruby in Discourse? Like, why just he didn't continue with .NET? Because his vision was to make Discourse open source, and there is kind of a rumor like about .NET. Even though we know .NET is an open source, but the software that is written with .NET is not actually open source. So for an open source, a lot of developers, they need to contribute. And if it is .NET, it is just like swimming upstream in a wrong direction. You can't convince developers. So moving on to the next slide. Let's talk about tech stack used by Discourse itself. So for the front end part, JavaScript is used with the popular JavaScript framework Ember.js, and CSS preprocessor Sass is being utilized just to have styling consistency and to avoid repetition of the code. And to add logic to HTML, templating engine called Handlebar is being used. Now, when we go to the backend side, Ruby on Rails is being used. And as we all know, Ruby is an open source interpreted language. And for data management, popular relational database PostgreSQL is used. Now, as we all know, querying to the database should be minimized as much as we can. And for this purpose, a popular caching software called Redis is being implemented. Also, Discourse has other powerful features like sending emails, sending notifications. And for this reason, there should be some kind of background job continuously running in the server. And this is perfectly achieved using Sidekick. So these are the main stack used by the Discourse itself. And now, if I have to talk about the tech stack that we utilized for our project, we basically worked on the theme development. So that means we worked on the front end part. So we did work with the JavaScript, some HTML with handlebars, some Sass and Ember.js. So now to talk more about our project, I will just hand over to Isan, who will be talking about the presentation.
I'm sorry, I was muted. So, hi, I'm Ishan. I'm the project co-lead for Team 1, FS Team 1 for the July session. And we started our project with the idea of creating a theme for the Stemaway site that can be added to the Stemaway site with additional features. So instead of starting from scratch, we took advantage of an existing open source theme called Fakebook, and we modified it and built our code on top of that to create a custom Stemaway theme. We also added customizations to the banners and cards already present on Stemaway. So for the banner, we added an expansion feature in which when we click on the current highlights, the banner expands to give you the current highlights of the forum. And for the cards, we added a rotation feature for the cards that when we hover over the cards, it gives us a glimpse of what the web page that it links to is all about, like a summary. And moving on to the next slide. So for our body, we took inspiration from the Gearbox Discourse forum. That's another Discourse forum. And we integrated our posts and categories into a unified body because that's what we were interested in and thought it would be look cool at the time. And it does. Moving on to the next slide. And since the main advantage of Discourse is that it has a separate mobile view and desktop view, both of which can be customized independent of each other. So our theme is compatible over all devices, be it mobile, tablets, and or desktop. So that's one of the main advantages of Discourse.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tarash Gupta, one of the project leads for Full Stack Team 2, Runtime Terror. We, along with our team participants, came up with this name. Yeah. So we worked on developing multiple theme components on the open source Discourse code base, and our development was divided into 2 sprints. In our first sprint, we worked on the 3D shadow box feature for the Stemaway website. On the left, you can see how the Stemaway text box looks like, and on the right are the changes we implemented to give the text box a 3D shadow layout, which simply allows the usual text presented to stand out. Now Mutaz will be going over the second sprint.
So for our second sprint, we wanted to tackle on a more challenging kind of project. And when we went around scoping it, we actually discovered a final project from the UX pathway from Stemaway that redesigned their navbar. So when we found this already sculpted project, we realized that if we could implement the UX pathways design, we could greatly help Stemaway and really modify how their navbar works to make it more user-friendly. So at the top, you can see the current navbar design, and you can see there are user settings, a logout button, a menu button, and underneath the profile avatar, you would find your notifications, your messages, and your bookmarks. So the proposed navbar design was to actually take the messages and notifications buttons out from underneath the profile button and bring them to the main navbar so that users could more easily access these highly useful features. While we found that generally people kind of couldn't find them, or it was like underutilized as a result. So going forward, I'm going to pass it off back to Tarish, who's going to talk about how it actually turned out.
Sure. So as Mutaz discussed earlier, so our major plan for this project was to take out the messaging button and the bell icon for the notification on the main navbar. And now it's looked more clear, more precise, and less cluttered as compared to which was it earlier. Now I'll be passing it to Jeremy.
I was muted. So as BJ mentioned earlier, that we split our teams into 3 sub-teams, and Mutaz and Tarush took on the challenge of moving out the buttons, the notification and messages buttons to the navbar. My cul-de-sac and challenge that I was faced with was to remove these glyphs that you can see on the left side. That was where the original buttons were hosted for people to view their bookmarks, their messages, and their notifications. And so I made those disappear, as you can see on the right. And then we made the default view go to the profile tab, which is what I'm pointing to there. Originally, there was a lot of challenges trying to get this to work, and but with also the help of James, we really got that to work. And a recent update, we actually were able to see these changes implemented on the Stemaway site, which is really cool because you can see your code in action. And we're still testing it, but it's a really big accomplishment and really rewarding to see that. And now I will hand it off to Sai, who will explain AWS.
Hey, Michael. I'm Sai Likith. I'm full stack pathway lead for June session. I'd like to talk about role of AWS in current and future projects of Stemaway. So first of all, we'll start with why do we need cloud? So for all the developments which we do in on-premise environment, we need to have a centralized development environment, right? So for that, we started deploying our projects into cloud. While deploying, we faced a lot of challenges like wrapping our project into Docker containers and maintaining the CPU limits, maintaining the security aspects of deploying into the cloud. So we started making some tutorials and posting it on our website. And currently we hosted our Discourse clone into AWS. Debaleena, if possible, you can click on the link. It will redirect, we can show it.
Let's skip that side. Sorry,
Okay.
we're running a little late on time, but I will make sure
fine.
to share it with Michael on the side.
Sure, it's okay. So currently we deployed a Discourse clone into AWS, and in future I can see that more of our projects will be into AWS centric, so that we can use maximum out of our cloud and we can all collaborate and work together on cloud. That would be highly reliable and available. So,
and scalable.
Yes, of course.
Alrighty. And in the same way that I started talking about my experiences, we would like to conclude with the experience of one of our participants, Kristen. And Kristen, can you tell me a little bit about how you crossed paths with Stemaway and your experience with your first internship as a UX UI participant?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm returning back to the workforce after raising kids for a long time. And so I contribute to the age diversity around here. And I had just finished a boot camp and wasn't feeling ready yet for the job market. So I was really hoping to find an internship. And like we mentioned earlier, internships are really hard to find. And in my case, I think they might have been a little harder because I wasn't currently a student. So that's why I really appreciate Stemaway, because I got a chance to have an internship in my situation. And I saw a link on a JavaScript Facebook group about Stemaway. So that's how I heard about it. And in June, I did the UX internship, and I had been intending to do the web dev or full stack one, but in the back of my mind for the past several months, I've been wondering if UX would indeed be a better career fit for me. So Stemaway gave me a great opportunity to try UX, and we were UX team 2, and I loved our leads and our team members, and I learned a lot, design thinking, user research, prototyping, and industry tools like Balsamiq and Figma.
Yeah, nice. So as we know, you did a second internship. So why did you decide to do a second internship, and specifically full stack, although you did a boot camp before that? And how did that experience benefit you?
Right. So I figured it would be good to still get full stack experience, because that's what my boot camp was in. And I really enjoyed the first one, so I figured, yeah, let's do another. And what's interesting about this one, full stack one that we just finished, is that I was exposed to a lot of things that I wasn't exposed to in my boot camp, Discourse, Ruby, Trello. So I learned a lot of new tools, which I appreciate.
Nice. It's nice seeing that the two complement from your previous experience in boot camps, also with the industry skills that you get from experiencing with Stemaway. So what was an experience that you always remember and associate with Stemaway, and what that has to say about the legacy that this company is making?
There are a lot of different experiences, I think, that just showed me what learning, collaborative place Stemaway is. I like the setup, how there's leads, and they were always willing to help and answer questions. I'll do a little shout out to Chucks, who was super helpful with me and my Discourse issues. The webinars were really helpful, and the other UX team invited our UX team to sit in on one of their webinars on doing a portfolio, and just everyone was there helping each other out, and it's just a truly collaborative place. And I also liked how Deb came to one of our UX groups and just wanted to greet each of us individually by name, and I thought that was really cool. So
definitely goes a long way when she comes by. I know it puts a smile on all of our faces. So if you could talk to Kristen 3 months ago, before you started these Stemaway internships, and knowing what you know now, what would be something that you would tell her?
Just be sure to do it. It's the things in life we don't do that we tend to regret more than the things we do. So I'm glad I did it. Otherwise, I would have missed out on a lot of learning and a lot of contacts with some really cool people.
Nice. Lifelong memories and lifelong friends. That is my motto from Stemaway Summer 2020 as well. And I would like to hand it back over to Deb. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. So Michael, And you can possibly see from my expression that I'm really, really proud of the students. That's the first reaction that I have when I look at the presentation. They had moments of frustrations. They had all of this different, obviously what we put on them was very challenging, but they did an amazing job. And I do want to open it up to you to your feedback on their work.
You guys have actually taken on one of the biggest challenges throughout my entire career in development, whether it was hardware or software, and that's communication. When I had a program once where I would bring elementary kids to work with me, and and I remember one comment was like, "Oh my God, you do homework all day," so, but I was an engineer, clearly in STEM, and they never saw me code. It was constant sending emails, right? Back then it was CC mail and all that, and bulletin boards, but fast forward to Discourse. But that challenge is so critical, and especially with today's global workforce, that will not stop. You are solving the problem much better than my initial approach. My initial approach was I just stopped sleeping. I was up in all time zones. So, China was up first. When China would go to sleep, Europe would wake up. So then my team in Europe would go, and then when Europe went to sleep, US would wake up. 5 p.m. in the US is 8 a.m. in China. Oh my God. And I was the connection to keep it all together. That worked for about, I would say 6 weeks, with diminishing returns over that after 6 weeks. I just didn't sleep. It's a horrible solution. And some of the strategies that got employed were, I did time zone management. I was like, Europe became my simulation zone. China became my bias team, and America was my architecture. So at least I can have teams working on the same problem, because nothing worse than sending an email and waiting a day to get an answer, to spend another day to send the next email, right? The tools we're working on are just super critical. Communication is going to absolutely be an unending challenge. And if anything, COVID-19 challenges, everyone working from home, has just really underscored the importance of communication. So I was really excited by the work you're doing, because it's a problem that as you get better and better at it, it will just get more challenging. I'm just certain of it. There were some comments that were made. You dove into open source. I've done a lot of open source work, because Intel's a simple company. We monetize silicon. But you don't use silicon unless you have software that will take advantage of it. So we give away software for free, so you buy the silicon. So nothing better than open source, right? For free software. But to the point that was being made, is that it's a huge database, if you will, of code. It actually took an interesting shift. I would love to hear, and feel free to comment. We can make this a two-way conversation. The difference between a hacker and a programmer, right? I found that when open source, a hacker is someone who wants to add value to something that exists. Finding what exists is yet a challenge. But a programmer likes to start from scratch and build it up and nice and clean. What I found is that, the world is switching to hackers, right? We learned Python scripting as your first language now. And I was like, that's not a language in my terms, right? But it's like, no. You want to find someone else's API that already has done 80% of it and modify it. I've always been a hacker. I'm a Debaleena, so my computer programming skills have always been, I'll hack my way to getting something to work. So open source was wonderful. But to your point, as you get into it, you become the expert, and you know where the bodies are buried, so you can help others dig up quickly and do that. So it was super exciting to hear about that. And you'll see across multiple companies a business note of simply, they tend to give away everything that they don't monetize. So Google gives away a ton of things, a lot of open source things. Ask for ask for the search engine algorithm. And, you know, and suddenly you're like, well, you know, Google's so big in open source, yeah, up until a point. And that's with every company. So you'll see that there was a comment about Discourse versus Stack. I forgot the name. Stack Exchange. And I was like, yeah, because they were trying to monetize Stack Exchange. So you know, you don't make, and we used to call that, I still call it open close. Well, you know, people contribute, but there's still a lot of control, and no matter what gets contributed, it's already old to the company that is contributed. And there's going to always be that business imperative to, you know, if it's something you monetize, it's hard to make money if you give it away, right? So I think you're going to see that all the time, and looking for solutions will change as you go through different companies, depending on what part they monetize. But that was really cool. You guys actually went through a ton of the tools that are used as standard practice, right? Open source community, GitHub, Ruby, scripting languages in general, are just the way clouds work. So it was really great to see all that coming together, as well as your conversations on Agile, right? I have found that the best work gets done when I will make things in 6-week sprints. They're super large programs, so at my level it might be 6 weeks, but as it rolls down, honestly, 6 hours isn't bad, right? It's like, what are you going to do in 6 hours? Spend 2 hours communicating what you've done or what you're blocked doing. And you guys spoke to that, and I think that experience, again, that experience of the internship is just irreplaceable. I could put it in a book. You guys can now write your own book and go, yeah, but until you experience it, you really, you don't have that tangible feel for the challenges of communicating, researching, and still becoming productive. I did want to take a quick second and talk about impact versus development, right? I think there was a conversation, and Debaleena stepped in and said, you know, we can work on a lot of things, but which ones will have impact? On many projects, I'll take open source. My team did a lot of Java development, and Java's an entire language. At times we would go through, I mean, there was a year where we went through and I think we optimized probably 60% of the code base. And if you look at each one individually, on average, a 10% gain. So then you have the new capability put out there, and people render their Java code, which a lot of scripting languages are built on top of the Java bytecode anyway, and you get 2% improvement. It's like, wow, everybody is so much smarter, it appears, for what they did, the lines of code that they contributed. But in terms of customer impact, 2%, and, you know, paying people, a group of people, millions of dollars for 2%, there's better ways to make 2%, right? Just buy Tesla stock. No, I'm kidding. It seems to defy gravity, but that's another conversation. It was so important to actually come back and say, what are the 2 things that I can improve by 50% instead of the 50 things I can improve by 2%, right? The 50% would change people's lives, or like, oh my God, we didn't even know that was possible. And as you start to focus in that design thinking that was brought up, so important to keep that customer involved through the whole process. I've seen so many times where we start with customer input and then we start developing, and we wait till we finish the full project and then go, okay, remember when we talked 6 months ago, this is what you asked for, here it is. And they go, well, you know, if you had just done this one thing, I would have been benefiting from it within 6 days versus waiting 6 months. Keep that always in mind. As you work in corporations, it is so easy to be customer focused, get their input, and at the same time lose the customer, because customer needs, especially with regard to software, can change so quickly, right? You know, as you were talking about, I was just looking at the headers going, you know, the email logo and pull down on new messages that you added to the header. I was like, that's great. And in my head, I was going, where's the Zoom button? You know, I was like, talk now, right? I was like, that's the world. Nope, you got to set up a meeting for those things. I was going, that's a great thing, but are we really sending emails every time we have a conversation? You know, it's just watching that evolution. Keep that close. I think that will work out well. I'm going to pause because I need a drink of water. And if you have questions for me, go for it.
Michael, I just wanted to let you know, Stemaway is built entirely on top of Discourse. So everything. So like you, I'm also not, my background is hardware engineering, and I'm a hacker in software. So the way I built Stemaway, found the best open source Discourse, and that is it. So everything on Stemaway is actually built on top of Discourse. It's also actually the one open source community where this is totally not, it's a totally side point, but it's the first time I was in an open source community where they didn't address me as sir. This 2 years I've spent building Stemaway. I've been very, very active in different open source communities, and it's always like, sir, thank you for your comment, or thank you for your feedback. Discourse was the first one where it didn't have that issue. Doesn't bother me, but it was just a kind of an interesting side note.
It is that's a very good side note. I think we talk inclusion and diversity, right? But it shows up in our everyday actions, and it's really simple. When Kristen said she's going back to the workforce, and I was like, being a mom is a really tough job, and you're shifting career goals perhaps, but you have never stopped working. But that was having kids. I'm like, yeah. You know, it's a tough job anyway. And it's way underpaid. But with that though, any other questions?
I do want to bring Chuck's back in because unfortunately he had some network problem. So Chuck's, you're there now, right? Yep. We do hear some.
What is the name that you're saying?
So his name is Solomon, and I think the first time I noticed him was in one of those team meetings where I visited, and I asked him, do you want to go by Solomon or Chucks? And he said Chucks. Actually, I'm not very sure. I think the first time I noticed Chucks was in the self-assessment, the one that BJ was talking about. We have this section called soft skills. And throughout the session, I've been kind of reading all the self-assessments to get a feel for what is happening. And in Chuck's one, I noticed one entry which I hadn't, you know, there are this list of expert compiled soft skills, but I've never seen this one before, patience. And I think like it's such a great one, especially in a challenging field like STEM. And so things like just in the discourse installation, it took so much patience to get everything going. But the reason that I wanted to bring Chuck's back is also wanted to give him a special commendation. He has been incredible in the way he has been helping people with discourse installation. So Chucks, do you want to just talk a little bit about what it entails and the help that you provided to people?
I believe he is.
All right. I think, I think still having some network issues. What I'll do, Chucks, is I'll give you a separate introduction to Michael because I do want to make a mention of the immense work you have done. Everybody in Stemaway has been incredible, but there are some people who went way above and beyond. So like Kristen was saying, there was a time when to help, Kristen, do you want to talk about it? I think in your own words would be better.
Yeah, I was just having some major discourse issues, and there was one day he spent between 8 to 10 hours with me trying to get discourse working on my machine. And the poor guy, because I'm on the West Coast and he's in Nigeria, so he probably went to bed at 3 or 4 in the morning for him after working with me for 8 to 10 hours. So he's a rock star in my view. So.
Awesome. Well, you know what? That's there's nothing better than others speaking for you. Identifying those key people, the knowledge base, so critical to starting up quickly. And it is awesome, and it's rare. Let me even add that, where people really put aside their own personal time in favor of the team's productivity. You expect it from a manager, and you don't get it from a lot of managers. You rarely expect it from individual contributors, right? This is, and I could tell from all you leaders that you really took focus on the team's development, not just your own personal learning.
Since you're talking about documentation, there's another mention that we wanted to make, and that's Jan. So she covered the resources in the beginning. I mean, all the leads have done an incredible job, but this was a participant who moved up and really did the documentation, which helped the remaining teammates. And the way I noticed it is when the July session was coming up, I was taking all the learning from the June session as kind of a pre-training for the July students. And in full stack, I had to do absolutely no work because there was this one perfect post that had everything. So thank you so much, Jan. And I just wanted to make a mention. And as this was the perfect opportunity, because as Michael said, the documentation part of it is so important. And what you achieved over there is absolutely, it was really critical. Thank you, Michael, for giving us a few extra minutes. Anyone has questions, feel free to go ahead.
I have a question to Michael.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Michael. So I noticed I went through your LinkedIn profile. So I found that you worked into systems engineering and optimization for almost like 30 years at Intel. So what changes did you observe in optimization when compared to like down the line 10 years? Like, would you like to share your experience with us?
Sure. I'll say two things. One, just because it was LinkedIn, it's hard to encapsulate 30 years. So I just put my last title. But, someone mentioned about avalanche versus, I can't think of
the snowball effect versus the avalanche.
Yes. I called it the ripple in the pond, right? So I drop I would look for a problem, and as that ring starts to get larger and larger, that's been my career, right? So I started off as an individual contributor, then I had a team of 2. I was one of the 2. Then I talked my manager to give me all the interns. Of course, we brought some of the interns back, but that team became 5, 7, 9, and then it ramps up to hundreds later. But one of the things in terms of software optimization, I did a presentation, and I work at Intel, so hardware is important to us. And I showed, here's what the generations of hardware give you running the same software over a 10-year span, I think it was. And it was about 12x, which is not bad, going from 1.0 to 12x over that time period. When I added the software stack, that 12x became 40x, right? And I was going, this is my contribution to Intel's success. So enjoy your 12 and give me the other 30, make the check out the cash and we're good. No, but it was all part of seeing that it's important to identify what people are doing. Once you understand their workloads, focusing on delivering transformative improvement, incremental improvement, is never bad. But personally, I like factors of X improvements versus percentage improvements. It's just a lot more fun, and it's a lot more empowering when something goes from taking an hour to run to taking a couple of minutes to run. It's just so much more cool for me personally. So with that, with the optimization, as one of the benefits of it is understanding what people are doing also helped me provide input to the hardware we were building, right? This is where people are going. They're going to be using more memory. So, hey, architects, think about a larger cache or better memory bandwidth. This is what databases are doing. They're spending a lifetime in on the hard drive back then. Then it's like, what could an SSD do? And when that happened, I mean, huge rooms of just storage disappeared and became, one drive, and of course now terabytes on a little Western Digital or a thumb drive. That's been the excitement, is that as you're looking at the development, as you're in the software space, you are building the new experience. And you're ahead of the curve because you're defining it through the lines of code that you're putting together. That, to me, is just, I don't know, I think that's just super cool to think that I'm not writing code to get it to work. I'm actually defining the way people will live going forward, right? My mom and dad, God bless them, they're 90 and 85, and I call and they go, we're on FaceTime. If they're not binging on some Netflix movie, because then they're like, don't bother me, I have to finish my movie. And I'm just like going, this is just incredible how the experience has changed, how it's getting so simple. Not that my parents are simple, but 90 and 85, it's just cool to get. I'll call you back. I haven't finished, Stranger Things. So it's like, okay, hey. But I'll pause there. Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
Sure. So I was just looking through some of my notes. Oh, by the way, one of the things I noticed, the fact that you guys have been working across teams on communicating was proven by the fact that you guys mute when you stop talking. And I was like, that's expertise, right? Most people forget to do that, and then you hear the toilet flush in the background. But you guys are definitely have the experience, because as each of y'all stopped, y'all muted, which was it was just funny to notice that. I was going, hey, wow, this team has done a lot of communication online. So, and I loved your team names. It is important to keep the job fun. Work's work. It's called work for a reason, right? It's not called fun. But making the job fun is just whether it's a team name, getting together, having those virtual happy hours or what have you. That's critical, because we are humans. And I like to talk about very often about technology, even within Intel, right? We start with sand, which we didn't make. And we deliver and sell compute. The difference between the sand and the compute, all people. And so, empowering people to do their best, to be inventive, to make these scientific jumps, it is so important that they stay motivated, that you guys, as leaders in the roles that you're playing, keep the team motivated, and having fun is a great contributor to that. So, I could tell by the amount of work that you guys have gotten done in very short summer, is quite impressive. And the fact that your teams are global, many people don't have global experience until they are really mature in their careers. So you guys are head of the head of the race, and it's pretty cool. And honestly, with Kristen's comments, I think it's cool that this platform serves as a way to get actual experience, to bring you up quickly back up to the edge of technology versus whatever duration that you left. That this is not just about internships for people coming out of college, but it's an internship for anyone who wants to be brought up to the state of the art quickly. And I think that was cool to see that diversity of the players represented.
It's amazing the way they work together, Michael. It was really like I had put in a lot of work, but every second I enjoyed just to see them in action. It was amazing, the work they did. And I had the team leads, especially the amount of effort they put in was not just 100, it was like 200%. And what I had promised them was coming out of this, they would have the kind of a same experience level as someone who has been in industry for almost, let's say, 5 years. Would you agree with
Maybe
that
even
based
more.
on the presentations?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like I said, you guys have actually run into a ton of the problems. Have great analogies, which you're able to communicate the challenges and how you've approached them and solved them. That is fantastic. And honestly, being able to communicate that's also a rare skill. Not every STEM person is a great communicator, and again, like I said, communication is just vital to getting the job done. It always has been. And now that things are so dispersed, I think it's even more important. So it was great to hear all the different presenters and the clarity in which you were able to present your challenges, your successes, and even what's next.
I have a question if you have some time left.
I do, Jeremy.
Okay. So I'm curious to know what is the single largest barrier to entry when entering the industry across time zones that you find in your experience, whether it could be communication, but it could also just be time management as well. But I'm just curious to know what most people face whenever they try attempting to take on this challenge. Because I know in my experience, I had no idea what Discourse was, but the barrier to entry is that learning curve. That's really steep. And so, yeah.
And it's always wonderful when you have some local expertise to kind of build a beachhead to get things started, and then very often you link those beachheads across the geographies. I think one of the biggest challenges is really, again, it's the communication, but it's communicating the narrative so that whether you're asleep or not, everyone understands why they're doing it and not just what they're doing. When you only understand what you're doing, you just have to be managed, right? And someone needs to be there to make sure you're getting what needs to be done. When you understand why you're doing it, you actually build in your own flexibility on how you get the job done, so that you're like, I think this is the way that this is the way I've been asked to do it, but here's a better way and I'll get it done faster because I know why they need me to do this. Once I've been able to communicate, I call it the narrative of why we're doing the development or what we're building, it goes so much more smoothly. And I know when I've been successful, when people start telling me the narrative as if it was their own and didn't realize that it may have come from me, I'm like, great, I can rest because they get it. And you want people to be flexible. I didn't get a sense of micromanagement because I guarantee you wouldn't have the smiles on your face if you were coming across as a micromanager. It takes so much more effort to manage behavior versus the ability to manage or to establish one's worldview. Right? When people share your worldview, their attitudes align and their behaviors align. If they don't share your worldview or attitude, or you don't even know what they are, then you're just task-masking behavior, and that just takes a lot of work. So in short, being able to build that narrative that everyone understands why we're doing this, the benefits of it, of what will happen when we're done, not necessarily what it looks like, but when we finish this, we'll be able to communicate much more clearly, much more quickly. You're like, yes, I am tired of this communication challenge. It took me 6 days and the answer was just one pointer, but it took me 6 days to find out that one answer because the communication was so challenging. And you're like, let's fix that. And you go, everyone goes, yes, let's fix that. And then I think to your success, that has happened. And a lot of the understanding, it wasn't just about the technology, but it was, here's the challenge, how can we improve it? And then that's, to me, the most important barrier to get past.
Thank you.
Michael, you had mentioned that in LinkedIn, you're not able to tell your whole story. So we have a solution for that, which I think one of the teams briefly mentioned one-click resume, but that's a topic for another presentation. But I'm hoping that you will come back and see the action that has been happening on that front.
That would be cool. My sense was you kind of have to use it along the way, but absolutely, you know, it's hard. You know, in the conversation, I'm like, leadership. It's like, you know, now I just say software development, right? You know, one of the things that you kind of alluded to from .NET to Ruby to JavaScript, it's like, you know, I used to always say, if there's a book to it, I could program in it, right? It's logic. So yeah, syntax I can learn, logic I have. So that worked back then. Now people expect you to come in and hit the ground running, you know, on whatever code base they're used to using. So, but yeah, let's see. I took a couple of notes. I just want to make sure I covered. I got the time zones, hacker programmer. I know. Hey, I don't have any other questions. Was very impressed by the work that you've done. Absolutely helps strengthen the platform of Stemaway such that the next group will continue to benefit and develop their skills. I think part of the learning as more and more people get involved is the teamwork. It is the, you know, cross-geography efforts. It is the jumping into code bases that you've never seen before and still finding a way to navigate that. You know, I think that the challenges that you have faced in short order and have accomplished so much are just going to be daily activity wherever you find employment. So great work. Debaleena, thank you for pulling this together. This has been quite impressive. Excellent work.